week's episode of Sword Art Online 2 attempts to mix things up by introducing a brand new guild, the Sleeping Knights. This group of badasses is led by Yuki, the Absolute Blade. She was introduced in last week's episode where she had a balls-to-the-walls confrontation with Asuna, and it was oh so satisfying. And at the end of that episode, Yuki was begging for Asuna's help, and that's where the episode ended. Well, my friends, in this week's episode, we get to see what she desperately needs Asuna's help for. She wants her to be the 7th member of her guild, the Sleeping Knights. Now, what's really interesting about these guys is that there's a lot of information about them that's being held back on us. We get names, we get faces, but we don't really get any backstories. We just know that this is a group of friends who've been basically playing games for a long time, and they want to fight this floor boss so that they can get all of their names on this Swordsman's Monument. And if you add up all of the puzzle pieces here and look at all the clues and stuff in the intro of the show, the fact that Yuki looks like she had a twin sister who suddenly disappeared, I'm just going to go ahead and take a shot in the dark and say that everybody here is terminally ill, or they're cancer patients, or something around those lines. There's going to be a twist to this arc, and there's a lot of information that Yuki is trying to keep away from Asuna as well. Something that Kirito, I believe, actually knows, and it was hinted at in this week's episode, but Yuki's not going to say a thing, and if they are terminally ill, that makes sense, because Asuna, honestly, when she decides to help them, would probably try to do all of the work, and there would be really no accomplishment from the team, and she might even, like, it wouldn't work. There'd be too much sympathy in the battle. It's a very interesting thing when you really think about it, and like I said, there's a lot of clues to all of this in the intro, and they sort of hint at it in the show. But the Sleeping Knights themselves, they seem like pretty interesting characters. It's a shame that there's only a couple more episodes, but they really need to expand on them a little bit. But let's just talk about some of the different members. First, there is Jun, who basically looks like the youngest member of the group. He's this kid with red hair and a really big sword. Kind of reminds me of like a younger version of Kirito. He's incredibly happy-go-lucky. Then there's the big tank dude, that's Techi. He pretty much doesn't say a word this week. He basically just looks like he's the bulky tank guy of the group. And then there's Talkin, who basically is this weird little leprechaun-looking dude who's really squeamish, wears glasses, and, you know, because everybody that wears glasses is really squeamish, right, anime? Whatever. The other characters, of course, is Yuki, Zekin, the Absolute Blade. She is awesome, and she even has a few action scenes at the end of this week's episode, which are pretty freaking intense, even though they are short-lived. There's also Nori, who I believe she's a Spriggan. She looks kind of like what Kirito's race is, and she just seems kind of like the tomboy of the group. And then we have Siune, who's probably my favorite. She's just kind of like a more subdued version of Asuna, a little more quiet, but that scene at the end of the episode when they're caught up by that group, she gets really excited over the prospect of a player versus player battle. So, the main thing about this episode is we get to see a little more FaceTime with the Sleeping Knights and Asuna, a little bit of development from their team, and then eventually they go to the boss room to check this boss out, and they get their asses handed to them. But they also figure out that there's this other team of boss hunter guilds, which have actually been spying on them with these weird creatures which go into the battle room, and then they can see what they see. So they can figure out all the secrets to take down these bosses, and sort of like steal their names so that they can put it on the monument. And when they finally get all their gear ready and go at the end of the episode, they get caught by this group who basically is telling them like, whoa, you can't go in yet, we're waiting for our group, and then we're gonna go kick ass. And they're basically trying to make sure they don't go in there and steal all the thunder. And that's when they decide they're gonna have to bring out their swords and start kicking ass. And this goes hand in hand with the scene at the middle of the episode where suddenly the game stops for Asuna because her mother just sort of pulls the plug on the game. And the scene is really, like, it's typical to what we saw during the dinner scene where it's really, really tense, and there's, like, not even, like, any, like, harsh fighting or anything between the two, and I think it's only a matter of time before Asuna is going to explode on her mother, especially when she learns that sometimes you just have to fight for certain things, and I can't imagine where this is leading to, but I imagine she's probably going to try and leave her family, or try to reconcile it in some sort of strange way, and her mother does bring up a really strange point, how she was stuck in SAO, how if you were stuck in a game like that for so long, why would you even want to go back to something like that? But when you're stuck in a situation like that, which is something we can't even possibly imagine, it's just something that is now ingrained in them. It's a part of them. And that's just an interesting dynamic of the show. It's not like, hey, stop playing video games, it's time for dinner. No, I was stuck in this place for freaking years. It's a part of my life. It's freaking SAO rules, SAO life. So I like the way that they're handling that, and I can't wait to see how it's going to result in the end, because you can just feel the tension in that scene boiling over. And that's when Asuna finally decides to join Yuki in the battle. She finally draws her sword. And then this other group of fighters is coming down the tunnel, when suddenly there he is, Kirito, who runs up this wall like freaking Neo in the Matrix, jumps down in front of them, and quotes one of the dumbasses earlier by saying, "You can't go past me." It was awesome. I hope we get to see a little bit of Kirito action at the beginning of next week's episode. All I know is I'm really interested to learn a little bit more about the Sleeping Knights and the secrets behind them. So what's the rundown? On this week's episode of Sword Art Online 2, I really liked it. It didn't have as much action as I was hoping for, but it introduced a brand new cast of characters in the final arc right here, and I'm kind of interested to see where they're going to go with it. They didn't really give them a lot of development, and they don't have a lot of time to do that, especially because they're getting ready to go into this boss battle right now, but I'm hoping I'll be able to understand things a little bit more when the whole secret about Yuki is out. And like I said, it's just so obvious that they're probably terminally ill. That's just there's so much evidence to that, especially with the whole Kirito scene and the fact that he probably wouldn't be able to help them. But otherwise, I think the Asuna thing in this week's episode, like the stuff with her mom and just the things she's going through with that, just like that makes this arc really interesting, because she's always been the side character. She's basically the main character of this arc right now, and I really like it, because I think Asuna can carry the series. I think she's an interesting character. I did really laugh out loud, though, at the very end of the episode when Kirito just ran out the tunnel. The first thing that popped in my head is like, oh, there's no way Kirito was going to let his thunder be stolen this episode. And it would have been interesting, too, because it would have probably been the first episode of the series, I think, without Kirito. I mean, there might have been one early in the first half of this season where it was strictly just Sino and stuff, and that might have been the second episode. But just, that's really strange, just, you know, and that's why it was just so funny seeing him come out at the very end with, of course, Yui hanging out on his shoulder. That's just really cool. Yuki herself, just awesome. She's so great, especially that scene at the end where she walks up to that one big dude who is just not moving, freaking Biff Tannen over here. She pulls out her sword, doesn't even look like she's scared to go into a battle, and then just starts slicing and dicing this guy up. And all of the Sleeping Knights are totally there ready to help, and frankly, I just can't wait to see what they're going to do against this boss, which is this big, massive giant with two faces and these big hammers with spikes on the end of them. So it's going to be awesome, and I love that they're holding back, like they didn't show any of the battle with it. So, you know, I'm not really sure what to expect from the battle with it aside from what they show in the intro. But I hope it's something they go crazy with, because it's going to be the end of Season 2 of Sword Art Online, and apparently there are more stories after this, and if this season is a success, we'll probably see a Season 3 later on, and frankly, I would like to, because I'm really digging, like, all the side characters they're focusing on now. I mean, Kirito's awesome. You know, we've known that since the beginning of the show. He's the frickin' black swordsman badass. But the side characters really need a chance to shine, and I think that's what they're doing with this arc, and they're being really bold by introducing just a ton of new characters at the very end of the arc. But still, I'm really enjoying this one right now. The intro is really great. You know, there's a lot of little things you can notice while watching it. You know, I always see something different every single week, it seems. But otherwise, on the technical side of things, this week's episode was very good, very clean, good animation, artwork, music cues were very, very good. And like I said, this is the type of arc that I think is just going to make you feel something good for the holiday seasons. So I like this episode. It was a little slow, and I wish I could have gotten a little more development from the Sleeping Knights. Otherwise, this was still a pretty stellar episode of Sword Art Online 2. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Check it out, guys. Really cool stuff. Thank you guys for watching my review. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And please tell me what you thought about this week's episode of Sword Art Online 2. What did you think of the Sleeping Knights? And what do you want to see from the rest of Sword Art Online 2? Remember, if you have not subscribed to our channel, you can do that by clicking on the channel icon right up here. You can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter.